Okay students, so it's time for the second of our independent learning videos for the 2-year A-level linear course in English language. So last lesson we were looking at word class, and you should have had a test on that by now. This lesson we're going to be looking at Lexis and Semantics. So this is probably about a 10-minute video that is going to take you through the booklet. Obviously if you're happy to work on the booklet yourselves, the page is given to you on Lexis and Semantics, then that's absolutely fine, but hopefully this will help you to work out the types of thing that you're going to be expert on in order to be ready for your test in your next lessons. Okay, so focusing on Lexis and Semantics. Okay, here's the booklet, and so we're going to be looking today at pages 4, there we are, excuse me, pages 4 and 5 and 6 really. Okay, so pages 4, 5 and 6 is probably where we are. So we're going to have a test, I'll tell you now, it's going to be out of 20, and it's focusing on Lexis and Semantics. So let me just get this central for you. So really the thing to start off with is this idea of what we're studying when we're studying Lexis and Semantics. We're not looking for lexis in a text or semantics in a text. We are the ones who are analysing these levels or frameworks or aspects of English. So we can analyse the lexis and we can analyse the semantics. And there's lots of terminology that would be considered lexical or semantic terminology. And we tend to sort of put them together, although they do mean different things. So lexis literally means the words, and semantics means the meanings. Okay, so what are the words like and how are meanings created? So it's sort of a level of analysis looking at words and what they mean and how meaning works in those words. Okay, it's not like grammar, which is about how sentences are put together, clauses and sentences are put together. It's about the words themselves, where they come from, how big they are and what they mean and how they mean it, things along those lines. Okay. So let's just skip over this. You can read this in your own time. The first thing to get to is this idea of denotative and connotative meanings. It's quite a sort of mouthful, denotative and connotative. But it's a nice way of describing different types of meanings. So connotations, you've probably heard of before, are sort of like the meanings that come to mind when you think of a word, whereas denotation would be the literal meaning of a word. So one of the things that says in the booklet here, that something that determines a writer's lexical choices is the meanings associated with the words. Words tend to have a couple of different types of meaning. So they've got the denotative meaning and the connotative meaning. So the denotations are the word's dictionary definitions, like the things that the actual elements, the sort of properties that make it what it is. And they also have connotations, which is the meanings we attach to words beyond their different definitions. Okay, so we tend to have denotative elements and connotative elements. So we have the denotative meaning of a word and the connotative meaning of a word. So what we've got in the booklet here is a nice example of different types of connotation. Connotations then are sort of things that sort of are brought to mind. So if I'm looking up a word in the dictionary, it's going to tell me exactly what that word means. So it's going to define it. So if I was to look up a word like triangle in the dictionary, the denotation of a triangle is two-dimensional shape with 3 sides, internal angles totaling 180 degrees. So the denotation would be just what that word means. So the denotation of a dove might be something along the lines of a bird in a particular family. It would probably give you me the Latin name for it, and it would define it in terms of its plumage and its colour and how it's sort of anatomically put together. It's just, what does a dove mean? But the connotations of a dove might be something like peace, or it might be something like purity, or it might be something like a feeling or an emotion, something along those lines. And so once we've passed the denotation, the literal meaning of words, the dictionary definition of words, we're into whether the positive or negative connotations can be seen. Okay? So what we've given you here is 2 synonyms, that's words with similar denotation, similar meanings, one with a negative connotation and the other with a positive connotation. So you can see that words that can have a similar denotation can have different flavours of associated meaning. So if we have a look at this one here, I recognise the smell of my roommate's cooking. I recognise the smell of my roommate's cooking. That's pretty neutral. But if I wanted to make that have a positive connotation, I'd give the word stench. I recognise the stench of my roommate's cooking. That suggests I don't like it. That suggests it's got negative connotations. Or I could have, I recognise the aroma of my room is cooking. Now you can tell from this, therefore, that even though aroma and stench and smell are synonyms, you'd go to a thesaurus, you'd find those words listed under smell, stench, aroma. They've got the same denotation, but they've got different flavours of meaning, different layers of connotative meaning. So the connotations are different. So let's have another look at a couple of ones down here, for example. Uncle Henry lives in a hut deep in the woods. So another word with the same denotation as hut would be shack or cabin, but hopefully you can see that they have different connotations. So a shack, Uncle Henry lives in a shack deep in the woods, that's quite negative, isn't it? Suggests he's out there on his own and it's not particularly pleasant. But if I was to say he lives in a cabin deep in the woods, it makes him sound quite posh, like he's got a holiday home or something. So again, same denotation, same denotative meanings, but different connotations here, positive and negative. And we've got a big long list of these. So what I suggest is that you read through all of these and try and work out, well, what is it about that word that makes it have a different connotation, even though they've got similar or the same denotative meanings. If you're looking for a word in the thesaurus, you'll have a long list of words that have the same denotation or very similar denotation, but they will have different connotations, is the idea. Okay, so that's denotation and connotation. Then we're on to some stuff that you might know already. We have lexical and semantic fields in one of the in English. One of the things that we're looking at in English language. Now, this sort of can be used interchangeably, but essentially the difference is that lexical fields are sort of connected by sort of subject area. They come from a similar subject, whereas semantic fields are words that are connected by connotations. So once you understand connotations, you can sort of understand semantic fields. So let's have a look at the examples that we can see and try and make sense of them. So in the lexical field of relationships, if the subject of say, a topic or a conversation is relationships, these are some of the words that you might find associated with that subject. Yeah, so love, ex, commitment, engaged, breakup, tiff, sex, etc. These are about relationships. If you're having a conversation about that topic, about that subject area, you might use those words. So they're in the lexical field of relationships. Okay. Lexical field of birds, or what we call ornithology, sort of bird watching, would be some specific sort of technical concrete nouns about birds, wouldn't it? From the subject field of birds, so dove, pigeon, penguin, hawk, sparrow. Lexical field of the military might have words like tank and SA-85T assault rifle and, artillery and things along those lines, okay? But the semantic field would have associated and connotative meanings in it as well. So if we have a look at this, the semantic field of death, black, but also raven, afterlife, Hades, the underworld. A yew tree is often symbolic of death. Funeral, noose. It's a much broader sort of idea as the semantic field. So in the lexical field of the military, we'd have, as I say, artillery and things like rifle and tank and things along those lines. But in the semantic field of the military, you might also have a word like horror or suffering or fear. Those are associated with war, they're associated with the military, or even things like pride and duty and honour would be associated with the military. So lexical is about the subject, whereas semantic is about the associated meanings. But as I say, it doesn't really matter if you get them muddled up when you're analysing things at this stage, but it's nice to know the difference. Okay, so the semantic field of peace, olive branch, agreement, handshake. So sort of a semantic field are associated by connotations, and lexical field are associated by subject area or specific type of conversation or topic. And there's a nice little one here to get you to think about it. The words dove and raven are in the common lexical field of birds, but they're in a very different semantic field. They are both birds and in topic of birds, but they're definitely different in terms of connotations, in terms of the semantic field. One's got death and one's got peace as their associated meanings. Okay, so that's our sort of lexical and semantic starting point. It's this page here on page 4. Over the page, we've got words and expressions. And on this page, you've got some key terms that you're going to have to learn for this first test. Okay, so the first issue here is about register. So if you just read through this, it's about register. Essentially, we've got high and low register, or fluctuating or mixed register. Register just means sort of like how complicated the words are, how difficult the words are. So if you've got, sophisticated lexical field, say such as philosophy or, religious studies or mathematics, then it's probably going to be quite formal with an intellectual audience with expertise, and it's going to have a high register. So it's not the same as formality is register, because I could actually be quite informal but quite high register. It's about about complexity. It's about the difficulty of those words and the reading age, essentially. If it's a high reading age, it's a high register. And alternatively, it's for short, common words, and it's quite informal, and it's meant to appeal to sort of children or uneducated, or sort of like quite broad readers. We'd say it's probably got a low register. And then fluctuating or sort of mixed register is when the writer's purposefully chosen to muddle that up a little bit. You often see this in broadsheet opinion articles. There'll be really, really high register, complicated words, but then every now and again, it'll do sort of quite colloquial or chatty or down-to-earth sort of idea. Okay, let's go through some of these key lexical terms then. So these are words specifically from Lexis to do with the words. It's a key idea. So they're not really to do with meanings. So we've got register. We've also got frequency. That's how common a word is. So very, very rare words are sort of occurring in a low frequency, and high frequency words are occurring in a high, very, very often. So we use the word drink very often, so it's high frequency, and we use the word beverage not as often, so it's lower frequency. So if register is about how complicated they are, frequency is about how common they are. High register words occur quite often. This one is a nice one. We're going to use this all the time. Mono, bi, and polysyllabic lexis, or disyllabic lexis if you prefer to use that prefix instead. So it's about how many syllables this word has got. So the word pram has got one syllable, buggy has got two syllables, disyllabic, and perambulator has got several syllables. So it's one syllable, two syllables, three syllables, or more. Okay? Subject-specific lexis, or sort of subject-specific, would be words in a particular area, so very similar to a lexical field. Jargon is a special profession or group. So, interestingly enough, we're using technical jargon for English all the time in this video. So technical jargon for IT might be something like, USB, or integrate the power supply at source, which means, switch it on, things like that. So a special profession or group's language, and it's hard for others to understand. Colloquial language is like everyday and informal language, like what's up and that dodgy bloke over there. Slang is sort of words from a particular group. It tends to exclude others, so epic, bay, merc, things along those lines. We've got a beef with them over there. So colloquial and slang are very similar. Dialect words are words that from a particular regional area. Please don't get into this debate. It can take up whole classes. It depends where you're from, what you call that. Is it a balm, a butty, a roll, a bread cake, a muffin? It's not that one is right or wrong. It's that they are specific to particular dialects. So language that's common to a particular area is called sort of dialect words. Okay, swear words plenty, taboo words, okay. So it's swear words, but it's also words that are sort of socially unacceptable. So it doesn't have to just be, your F and C and S words and things along those lines. It would also include a sort of certain pejorative and racist terms as well. Okay, formal and informal address terms, that's the way you refer to people. I'd hope you don't call me mate. I mean, you can if you like, but it's more likely that you'd call me by my name, Dr. Mark or Phil. You certainly probably wouldn't call me cuz. And courtesy items would be things like saying please and thank you. So you've got formal and informal courtesy items. So an informal one would be like tar, and a formal one would be greatest of thanks, and I'd be grateful if, and things like that. Archaic words are old words. Okay, so old-fashioned words such as forsooth, betwixt, like if you're reading Shakespeare, things along those lines, really old words. And neologisms are really new words. So within the last 10 or 20 years or so, or 21st century words, new words, it literally means newly created words. So sexploitation is taking two existing words and putting them together. Even something like Facebook, actually, face and book, compound those two words together, you get a new word. You've coined a neologism, a new word, Facebook. Okay? Contractions, merging two words together, don't, won't, I've, could have, would have, and wouldn't. Obviously, you don't tend to do those in formal texts and essays, but you do use them in general everyday communication. And then collocation, these are quite nice actually, words that traditionally are attached together, so fish and chips, fake news, spick and span, things along those lines, words that you often find together. Okay, so those are some of the words. You're going to be tested on these. So I would recommend putting these into your glossary, rewriting them with your own examples so that you can really get to grips with them. Okay, and then finally we're just onto some semantic terms. So this is the key ideas in semantics, and nicely for the semantic ones, you should know quite a lot of them already from GCSE because it's most of your literary terms that you've done from studying literature. Okay, so words with denitive meanings are not always sufficient. You're often going to use layers of meanings. So if you're going to communicate an idea, you might words with more connotative meanings or expressions. Okay, so it was painful is completely denitive. It just means what it says. But if I use a simile, it was as if my heart had exploded all over the place. Thankfully, it's non-literal, it's figurative. That simile is a semantic effect, a semantic feature. And basically, all of your literature stuff from GCSE, your sort of linear GCSE 9 to 1, those literary terms, like simile and metaphor, are semantic terms at A level. So, we'll have a look at some of those then. So simile and metaphor, obviously you should know those. The metaphor saying something is something else, and simile saying it's as or like something else. Personification, non-human qualities, the yawning chasm, sighing of the wind, the car door groaned, things along those lines. Loaded terms, you might not have done those, but it's pretty easy. Words that have strong emotive connotations. So if I call you if I say you're a terrorist, that's very, very loaded, isn't it? It's got loads and loads of association. It's quite a dangerous word. But you could also say I'm a freedom fighter, or a word that's sort of got lots and lots of positive connotations. It's a very, very strong, loaded with tons of meaning. I mean, look, something like democracy, things along those lines, really meaningful word. Zoomorphism then, very difficult to say, much less to spell, but it's sort of the opposite of personification, really, or the opposite of anthropomorphism. So the crowd swarmed, they cooed over the baby. So we're giving animal qualities to humans and non-animals, so making them seem more like animals, like you'd see in a zoo. Euphemism, the opposite of that is dysphemism, but we won't. It's just down here, dysphemism. So essentially, you've got a nice way of saying something and a less nice way of saying something. So it's not an objective judgment. Is it nice or nasty? Are you trying to be nicer in the way you say it, or are you trying to be nastier in the way you're saying it? So a polite or indirect phrase. So to pass away sounds nicer than to die, doesn't it? And to spend a penny sounds nicer than to go to the loo. Whereas dysphemisms tend to be blunter, so it's often offensive. So, the loony bin for the mental ward, or, I will say this on the video actually, like to go to the loo is euphemistic, but to have a slash, that would be dysphemistic. And obviously political euphemism is very useful, so you can have words that are politically indirect. So we talked about neutralizing a threat. It sounds a nicer way of saying we killed somebody. Friendly fire is another political euphemism, meaning we accidentally killed our own soldiers. Or collateral damage, meaning we dropped a bomb and we accidentally killed lots and lots of innocent bystanders, as well as the guy we meant to kill. So often it's used in politics and used in references to sex as well, of course, lots of euphemism there. Metonym is like symbolism, so something that is used for an associated thing. So the crown is from the semantic field of royalty, but it also can be used to stand in for it. The left is people who are on the liberal side of politics, like most of your teachers, I would imagine, and then brains for intelligence. And then synecdoche is a type of metonym where it's a part used for the whole thing. So actually crown and brains could be seen to be that in a sense, but it's more like something like wheels or threads or heads for people. So wheels is part of a car, but it can be a metonym for the whole car. Threads is part of your clothes, but it can be used as a metonym for all of your clothes. Okay, interesting on the difference between metaphor and metonym. So if I would say somebody's got a six-pack, if I say somebody's got a six-pack, that's like a sort of a metaphor for them having sort of a toned stomach, isn't it? It's like a visual metaphor. They've got a six-pack. But if I would say, if someone had a big beer belly and I said, oh yeah, they've got a six-pack, that's a metonym because the six-pack of beer is like a symbol for their lifestyle in a way. So it's this idea of a metaphor is sort of like a figurative way of saying something. It's sort of often quite visual, whereas a metonym is almost like symbolism. It's something that sort of symbolizes the whole way of life or the whole bigger idea. A crown symbolizes royalty. The left is sort of an umbrella term for liberal politics in that way. Okay, then we've got idioms and idiomatic expressions. So the sort of like phrases, they're the things that would be difficult to translate. So it's, oh, you're a fish out of water, or it's raining cats and dogs. And then cliches are like idioms, but have become overused. So, oh, I was frightened to death, or it's raining cats and dogs, or something like that. Something that's an idiom that's used an awful lot, a saying that's used an awful lot. And cliche, obviously, you can get in like narrative. So, cliche stories, for example. Oh my goodness, boy. Gets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back again. It's so cliche, isn't it? Or I didn't fancy him at all, and then I did. Those types of really cliche narrative structures you get in not very good stories and films. Okay, and then we've got ones you might know before. Hyperbole is just the posh word for exaggeration. The feedback was brutal, so that might also be quite dysphonistic as well. And then repetition, just using a repetition of a particular word or phrase. Okay, so that's it. That's Lexis and Semantics. We'd expect you to put quite a lot of these, if not all of these, into your own glossary, which you're supposed to be ongoing with. And of course, it's only useful if you use your own examples to show that it makes sense to you. The glossary is something that you need to keep up with right the way throughout. You're going to reorganize it. You're going to keep adding things to it. But it has to have examples and explanations that make sense to you. So don't just copy these out, and certainly don't copy and paste glossaries from the internet. It's about a constant process of learning for your independent work. Okay, so best of luck with the test.